chắn có nhầm lẫn gì đó.
Giơ tay ra.
Xin đừng. Xin đừng.
Xong rồi. Đi thôi.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, as Diem is walking home from the market, a masked stranger suddenly appears and kidnaps her right in the middle of a deserted road. Just a few minutes later, Diem wakes up inside an abandoned house tightly tied to a chair. But what shocks her even more is that the person behind all of this turns out to be Toan's mother. Meanwhile, back at home, Toan starts to feel uneasy when Diem hasn't returned for a long time. He keeps calling her phone but can't reach her. A bad feeling creeps in, and Towan immediately begins searching everywhere for her. Will Towan find the place where Diem is being held in time? And why would his own mother do something like this to her? Watch until the end of the video to find out what happens next. And don't forget to like and subscribe to follow the next dramatic episodes of the story. Towan and Diem. The village road at noon is quiet and almost empty. Sunlight falls across the narrow dirt paths that run between the fields, while a gentle breeze makes the trees along the road sway softly. Diem is walking along the familiar road from the market back to her home. In her hand is a small basket after a morning of selling vegetables. Her steps are slow but relaxed. Today, the vegetables sold quickly, so she's heading home earlier than usual. Every now and then, she looks ahead thinking about Towan and the small house waiting for her. The road becomes quieter the farther she walks. On both sides, there are only bushes and wide fields stretching into the distance. Diem doesn't notice that behind her, a figure quietly steps out from behind a large tree. Suddenly, a masked man rushes toward her from behind. Before Diem can even turn around, he's already right next to her. In a split second, he pulls out a piece of cloth and presses it tightly over her mouth and nose. Diem panics. She struggles trying to push the cloth away with both hands. The basket in her hand falls to the ground, and several bundles of vegetables roll onto the road. But after only a few seconds, her body begins to feel dizzy. Her breathing grows heavier, and her head starts spinning. Diem tries to resist one more time, but her strength quickly fades. The world in front of her eyes starts to blur. Everything around her sways. And then finally, her body goes limp, and Diem loses consciousness in the stranger's arms. The man quickly looks around the empty road. No one is nearby. He immediately drags Diem toward a car hidden behind a line of trees. Just a few minutes later, the car drives away. The village road becomes quiet again, as if nothing had ever happened. But somewhere, a dangerous secret has just begun for Diem. After a while, Diem slowly begins to regain consciousness. Her head throbs, and her breathing feels heavy, as if she has just come out of a terrible nightmare. When she opens her eyes, she realizes she's in an old abandoned house. The walls are stained and cracked. The windows are broken, and faint light slips in through the gaps. Diem tries to move, but she immediately realizes that her hands are tightly tied to a wooden chair. The rope is pulled so tight that she can barely move. Fear instantly rises in her chest. She quickly looks around the room. In the corner of the house, the masked man is standing with his back turned. He's holding a phone, speaking in a low voice, as if he's talking to someone. Diem tries to listen carefully. The man briefly says that everything is done and that she has been brought to the right place. His voice is calm, as if this had all been planned ahead of time. On the other end of the phone, a woman's voice responds. The moment Diem hears it, she freezes. Even through the phone, the voice sounds very familiar. It's Toan's mother. She asks the masked man if Diem has woken up yet. The man glances over at her before replying that she has just regained consciousness. Diem hears every word clearly, and her heart starts pounding. She cannot understand why Toan's mother would be behind something like this. The air inside the abandoned house becomes tense and suffocating. The masked man ends the call and slowly turns his head to look at Diem still tied to the chair. His eyes are cold. Somewhere it feels like a huge secret is about to be revealed. Back at the small house, the afternoon is slowly passing by. The sunlight in the yard has begun to soften, but Toan is still standing by the door, looking out at the familiar road that leads to the market. Normally by this time, Diem would have been home a long time ago. But today, the road is still quiet. Toan glances at the clock hanging on the wall, then steps outside into the yard once again. A strange feeling of worry starts to grow inside him. He tries to reassure himself that maybe Diem sold vegetables a little later than usual today. Or perhaps she stopped somewhere along the way. But the longer he waits, the stronger his uneasy feeling becomes. Toan quickly takes out his phone and calls Diem. The phone rings several times, but no one answers. He frowns, looks at the screen, and tries calling again. This time the phone still rings, and then stops. There is no response from Diem. Toan begins pacing back and forth in the yard. He thinks back to the morning when Diem left for the market. Everything had seemed completely normal. There had been no sign that anything bad could happen, but the uneasy feeling in his chest refuses to go away. Toan calls a few more times, but the result is the same. He still can't reach Diem. His heart begins to beat faster. A frightening thought briefly crosses his mind. Without hesitating any longer, Toan quickly throws on his jacket and rushes out of the house. He decides to head straight to the market to look for Diem. What he doesn't know is that, somewhere not far from their home, Diem is in danger inside an abandoned house. Inside the abandoned house, the air felt heavy and still. Dust floated slowly in the faint sunlight that slipped through the cracked windows. The wooden floor creaked occasionally under the slightest movement, and the smell of old wood and damp walls filled the room. Diem sat tied to the chair, her wrists sore from the tight rope. Her head still felt dizzy from whatever the masked man had used earlier, but her mind was slowly becoming clearer. She forced herself to stay calm. The masked man had been watching her silently for a moment after ending the phone call. His expression remained cold, unreadable. Then he turned and walked toward the door. For a brief second, Diem thought he might leave her alone. But before she could say anything, the sound of a car engine echoed outside the house. The noise grew louder, then stopped. Diem's heart began pounding again. Footsteps approached the door. Slow, calm, deliberate. The door creaked open, and then she saw her. Standing in the doorway was a woman dressed neatly in a dark blouse and long skirt. Her posture was straight, her expression calm but firm. It was Toan's mother, Mrs. Trung. The moment Diem saw her, clearly disbelief filled her eyes. "Auntie," Diem whispered, her voice shaking. Mrs. Trung stepped inside the room without answering immediately. Her eyes slowly scanned the room before settling on Diem. Behind her, the masked man quietly closed the door and stepped aside. Mrs. Trung walked forward slowly, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Diem felt a chill run down her spine. This was not the warm, polite woman she had known before. There was something cold in Mrs. Trung's eyes now. Mrs. Trung stopped a few steps away from Diem and looked down at her. "So, you're awake," she said calmly. Diem swallowed hard. Auntie, why am I here? She asked, her voice trembling. Why did you do this? Mrs. Trung didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled a small wooden chair closer and sat down across from Diem. The distance between them was only a few feet. The room became painfully quiet. Finally, Mrs. Trung spoke. You probably have a lot of questions, she said. Diem nodded quickly. Yes. Please tell me what's going on, Diem said. If I did something wrong, you can tell me. But why bring me here like this? Mrs. Trung studied her face carefully, as if trying to read every expression. You really don't know, Mrs. Trung asked slowly. Diem shook her head. I don't understand anything. Mrs. Trung let out a quiet breath. For a long time I've been watching you, she said. Diem blinked in confusion. Watching? Me? Yes. Mrs. Trung's voice remained calm, but every word felt heavy. You appeared in my son's life suddenly. And since then, everything about him has changed. Diem frowned slightly. I don't understand. Mrs. Trung leaned back slightly in the chair. Toan used to focus on his future, she said. He had plans, ambitions, a clear direction. Her eyes hardened slightly. But ever since he met you, he started giving up opportunities. Diem's heart sank. That's not true, she said quickly. I never asked him to give up anything. Mrs. Trung raised her hand slightly. Let me finish. Diem fell silent. Mrs. Trung continued speaking slowly. My son was offered a chance to work in the city. A good job. A better future. Her gaze sharpened, but he refused. Diem looked shocked. What? He said he didn't want to leave the village, Mrs. Trung said. He said he wanted to stay here. Her voice lowered. With you. Diem's chest tightened. She remembered that conversation now. Toan had once mentioned an opportunity in the city, but he had laughed it off and said he preferred the quiet life in the village. She had never thought it was serious. I never told him to stay, Diem said softly. Mrs. Trung's eyes narrowed slightly. But you didn't encourage him to leave either. Diem had no answer to that. The room grew quiet again. Mrs. Trung stood up slowly and began walking around Diem, observing her carefully from different angles. You seem like a simple girl, she said. Diem felt uncomfortable under her gaze. I am Diem replied quietly. I just sell vegetables at the market. Mrs. Trung stopped behind her chair. Yes, she said. Exactly. Then she walked back to face Diem again. My son deserves more than this life, she said firmly. Diem looked down. So you kidnapped me because of that, she asked weakly. Mrs. Trung did not answer directly. Instead, she asked another question. How long have you known Towan? A few months, Diem said. And in those few months, he has become completely devoted to you. Diem's face turned pale. I didn't plan that, she whispered. Mrs. Trung studied her expression carefully. Then suddenly she leaned forward. But that's not the real reason you're here. Diem looked up in confusion. What do you mean? Mrs. Trung's eyes became serious. There's something else I need to know. Diem felt her heart start racing again. What? Mrs. Trung reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph. She held it up in front of Diem. Do you recognize this? Diem looked closely. The moment she saw the photo, her eyes widened. The picture showed an older man standing beside a small shop. Diem's breathing became uneven. That's my father, she said quietly. Mrs. Trung watched her reaction carefully. Yes, she said. Her voice became colder. Your father. You seem like a simple girl, she said. Diem felt uncomfortable under her gaze. I am Diem replied quietly. I just sell vegetables at the market. Mrs. Trung stopped behind her chair. Yes, she said. Exactly. Then she walked back to face Diem again. My son deserves more than this life, she said firmly. Diem looked down. So you kidnapped me because of that, she asked weakly. Mrs. Trung did not answer directly. Instead, she asked another question. How long have you known Towan? A few months, Diem said. And in those few months, he has become completely devoted to you. Diem's face turned pale. I didn't plan that, she whispered. Mrs. Trung studied her expression carefully. Then suddenly she leaned forward. But that's not the real reason you're here. Diem looked up in confusion. What do you mean? Mrs. Trung's eyes became serious. There's something else I need to know. Diem felt her heart start racing again. What? Mrs. Trung reached into her bag and pulled out a small photograph. She held it up in front of Diem. Do you recognize this? Diem looked closely. The moment she saw the photo, her eyes widened. The picture showed an older man standing beside a small shop. Diem's breathing became uneven. That's my father, she said quietly. Mrs. Trung watched her reaction carefully. Yes, she said. Her voice became colder. Your father.